You are listening to the Hustle and Glow podcast with Francesca Alexander. Hello there. This is Francesca. So glad that you're here listening to this one. This is a good one. This is Catherine van der Meulen. Now, Catherine is doing something really extraordinary here in New Zealand. She's actually just before, and I'm going to preface this. This is a recording that we did before the shutdown that's happening here in New Zealand. She has this amazing event called Entrepreneurial Women with Purpose, and it's going to be an event that's happening in Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch. So these three huge cities in New Zealand. She's going to be talking about a couple of things where they can actually help activate women in business, smaller entrepreneurs, solopreneurs that really have a purpose in business and want to contribute to this world in a kinder, gentler way with their business. So this is a really fascinating conversation that I had with Catherine. And they're still on. They're still scheduled to go on in May. We'll see how we go in our particular shutdown that's happening. But she's also open to getting these events online. So this is going to be something that's evolving as day to day, as week to week, as we all are in terms of what do we do when we have events scheduled. But
actually try to do a couple of podcasts, but I failed miserably because I was so angry and I couldn't really have clear thought process around why female businesses don't really get proper funding. And so this will be actually part of the interests of Catherine and a bunch of other things. She's actually really, really fascinating. I will start by introducing her to you and welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much. Really excited to have this conversation with you and explore those angry moments with you. I'm keen to unpack that anger piece with you.
Very good. So tell me a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so I have been in the coaching consulting sphere for many years, and before that we had our family business back in Australia and New Zealand called Supre. And since we've sold that business and, transitioning in lots of different life moves, we decided to move to New Zealand earlier this year. And I continued my coaching journey. And the original premise about me doing business coaching in New Zealand was really just to connect to lots of different people and have lots of different conversations and find out what was really going on in the world of New Zealand, because it was a completely new market for me. And really just to understand what the market was like and what businesses were doing and what interesting things that people were involved with in their projects. And it really gave me the foundation and premise to build something that was really meaningful over here. And over that time, I've developed a project called Entrepreneurial Women with Purpose, which is what we're rolling out at the moment. And that came about because I was chatting to lots of different women in New Zealand, as I mentioned, and realizing that they all had these incredibly successful organizations, and they're also doing something for the greater good of the world. So whether that was community projects, whether that was social impact projects, whether that was environmental impact projects, they were all doing something that wasn't just about making profit. Yes, we know that that's important and income generating, but they were also doing something that actually had a meaningful and long-term benefits for their community or their environment and so on. So, yeah, that's been really wonderful to kind of nourish and bring that to life over this year. And, yeah, so we're rolling that out as we speak.
That's so interesting. I feel like there's been a kind of a conversation around warming up about this particular going into your purpose, and we hear about that. I know in my space, and even coming from the US, that's been a 10 plus year conversation. However, I find now it's a bit more exciting because we're actually doing it. We're not just discussing, hey, we should go into our purpose, but we're actually starting to do it. So I think that would be really interesting is actually just kind of peel back some of those layers and go, all right, I have a purpose-driven business. What do I do? How do I start? How do I find resources? How do I know I'm doing the right thing?
I guess probably to start with, I wanted to kind of unpack purpose, because I think there's so many people and so many conversations that I've had about, my purpose and living on purpose and my reason for being and my reason of why I get out of bed every day. And I kind of get this perplexed and bewildered face staring back at me sometimes. That they're like, I know in their heart they're saying, what the hell is she talking about? What the hell is purpose? And not really connecting and understanding what purpose actually has to do with business. And so I wanted to first start by saying purpose is not a fluffy coin. And we now have the data and the insights to back to say purpose is a true foundation of driving and creating a successful organization that is actually sustainable, not only for now, but also for our future, if that's what we want to do with our organization. We now know that purpose-driven organizations can and will get incredible funding and investment behind them because they do have a greater reason for being. We now know that purpose-driven organizations have a much higher sale price point, for example, if it is something that you're wanting to do is to sell your organization in the future. And having that reason for being and that why as to what drives this business, what is the true reason for creating this organization? Does it solve a social issue? Does it solve a community issue? Is there a greater reason for why we're doing it? And it's not just about profit. It's actually about the fundamentals of what gets us excited and why we have this driving force of wanting to create a product that there's actually a need for, or a service that people actually need and desire, and not something that we just want to create for the world. So I hope all of that makes sense. Really about the purpose piece. And I think, I've been talking about purpose for many years. I used to teach in schools and community groups just after I had my second child, and I developed this program called Discover Your Purpose. And that was about teaching and engaging teenagers on connecting to their purpose, understanding what their purpose is, and then actually creating a lifestyle and a career around purpose. And this was my son's 6, so this was 6 or 7 years ago that I started talking about purpose. And I realized what the importance of purpose was after leaving our family business. And I saw that organization when it had incredible purpose, and I saw it when it had no purpose whatsoever. And one was an extremely high point and a really successful time in our business, and one was a really dark, low, toxic place. And I knew after stepping out of the business what our business looked like with purpose and what our business looked like without. And I knew that if I hadn't discovered and connected or started to connect to my purpose, then I wouldn't really have gone on this journey in my life. And I wanted to teach teenagers through schools and through community groups how to find their purpose and go on their own journey, not somebody else's journey.
That's so fascinating. So I think that, and when it comes to purpose and putting your business or wrapping around it, there are a lot of second guesses, because then we get into the what I say called the opposition, and we start talking about that profit driven focus, very I guess can be considered male dominated, sort of that sort of environment where it's a P&L focus instead of like, okay, well, how are we serving the community? And a lot of companies, even the Body Shop that was started in the 70s, had that sort of driven environmental focus. and knew that people would come and people would appreciate and the profits would grow. It's only when you take it off that path, and they're actually a really good case study, that you see when you get into that sort of like, oh, let's tear everything down about purpose, and let's put everything about scaling and all of these other types of price-driven sort of relationships instead of client relationships, how that particular company started to actually, you could see that it was starting to ticker down and it lost its momentum entirely. How can women stand up? And this is why I think the funding conversation is quite interesting. How can women, with the lack of data that shows this, how can we really know that as we are going into our, I guess, inner intuition on, listen, this is a purpose-driven business. I know that if I'm serving people, that everything else is going to come. How do we keep on that path and know that that is the right way to go?
I think there are some incredible universal signs that tell us if we're on the right path or not. If I look back at my path living in Sydney last year, I was continuously getting blocks in my life. And, I was working for organizations that didn't give me the love that I knew that I needed to grow myself and to educate myself and push myself forward. And I continuously got these blocks, and I was continuously going for these amazing roles, and I was continually getting pushback. And I stood back and I thought, why am I not going on this journey? Why has the universe got another path for me? And, that path ended up me, moving with my children to New Zealand and going on this journey. And everything that's happened this year that I've been here, since I've been here, has gone in this incredible state of flow. And I know, hand on heart, that flow has happened because I'm living and breathing and I'm on purpose. And there is data and there is science and there are facts behind purpose-driven organizations. And actually, just by connecting to who you are, knowing who you are for starters, connecting to who you are and really living and breathing that purpose and making all of your decisions based on that purpose and not steering away from that, you will start to see the rewards and you will start to see that abundance being attracted back to you. So it's really, there are amazing books and there are amazing white papers to read about this, and there are, reports that you can now read that do have that data and do have that science and those facts. But I think it's once you actually feel it yourself, when you are in that great state of flow and you are then having organizations come to you and want to be a part of your journey, or, individuals approaching you to connect the dots, when you get that kind of response, that is your purpose really coming to life. So I think it's really in probably our own intuition and also the universe that actually guides us on that journey.
Great. I think that I love that you're, I mean, obviously it's been, there's some reciprocity between you staying focused on that particular purpose-driven type of criteria that you go with your business. Are there any sort of like daily practices that you go, all right, I got to get myself ready for the day? Or is it something that you do ritually that helps you stay focused?
There's probably a few tools and strategies that I use to stay focused. I guess it's really, first and foremost, it's about if you don't feel like you know what your purpose is, and if you don't know that your purpose is ingrained into your organization, there's a really simple way, and it's about drawing 3 circles on a page, and those circles need to overlap with each other in the middle. And in the first circle, you have, the things that you're passionate about. The second circle are the things that you're interested in. And the third circle are what your skills are. So if you list into all of those different areas what those things are, your passions, your interests, and your skills, and you see the things that actually overlap in the middle, that's where we really start to unpack that purpose. And the way that I've done that over the years and unpacking it, and it's a continuous journey, is through journaling. So I journal probably every single day, sometimes twice a day, in the morning and in the evening, really unpacking those things, unpacking those conversations, unpacking the reasons why I'm getting those blocks in my life, unpacking why my life is in a state of flow. And through that process, really starting to learn about myself. So that's a practice that I continuously do every day. I wouldn't be able to live and breathe and have the energy that I do to keep this pursuit going if I didn't exercise every day, and whether that's running or a HIIT class or yoga or something that's keeping my mind and my body and my spirit, my mind and body and spirit moving, and just having wonderful conversations with interesting and like-minded people. When we first connected, we had this incredible conversation. It wasn't about anything really. It was just about who we are and about life and about experiences. And it's those connections and those moments that are actually that fuel. And I think if you can inject those into every single day, that's part of that ritual, is having those conversations and feeling things out. And when things aren't going on purpose, when you're not getting the response that you need, or you're not getting the engagement, or you're not having those deep and meaningful conversations. But every conversation that I've had this year has reflected what has happened with this new project with Entrepreneurial Women with Purpose, because there has been this deep level of engagement and interest and, wonderful conversations, so I think that's how we can really know if we're on that right journey.
Now, this is a real interesting one, because I this is something I still sort of like fill out and not sure exactly how to approach this. But how do we invite into the conversation our male counterparts and tell them why this is important, why this movement, and when I say movement, it's everything that is female related. And there's a lot happening in the last 2 to 3 years in terms of the Me Too movement and really pushing back on accountability. So already we're entering a conversation that has that defensiveness. I myself have stopped podcasts, as I said earlier, because I went, whoa, that is so aggro. I'm not going to get my point across. If there is male listeners, and I just resigned to the fact at the end of this year, it's like, well, are you after male listeners? Like, do you really want them? And it's a yes and no. It's like, I would like to have those conversations. I think as an American living in New Zealand in particular, it's a bit tougher. I find that the culture is very much into the 1980s, 1990s, and those type of cultures are existing within that sphere. I've had an interesting conversation this week that was sort of, jaw-dropping. There was an incident where I called out in a business environment that was wrong, and that director, who was a male, came back to me and said, well, that person doesn't have, what would you have them do? They don't have a lot of experience in dealing with sexism. And I'm like, he's a man. Of course he does. What we're asking is to rise up at those moments and say, hang on, let's refocus at this moment. You could do it with humor, you could do it with whatever, but do something. And I'm still pushing up against that, but I want to do it in a less, and of course the whole stereotype of Americans.
Confronting way.
Yes, exactly. How do we invite that conversation in a way where there's actual dialogue?
Well, I think fundamentally, rather than coming up against criticism or confrontation and those areas, I think it really, and like everything, knowledge is power. So if we go into a situation and we go into a conversation and we're wanting to get our point across and we're wanting to engage, in that conversation, and, I've certainly had some interesting conversations like that. this year. And for me, rather than me judging or me criticizing their point of view, I acknowledge that that's their point of view, and I accept that that's their point of view, and I just share my perspective with knowledge and with insight, and really reading into that conversation. How is that person communicating? Do I need to then be reflective of how that person is communicating, or do I go back into my soft feminine nature, or should I approach them in a conversation and communicate the way that they're communicating? And I don't allow myself to communicate like that, because if I don't feel that it's right, and if I feel like I'm being kind of pushed into a corner in that conversation, I very quickly turn it around and ask lots of questions. And I think if we ask lots of questions, and then at the same time sharing our knowledge and our passions and our interests, then it's not very difficult to kind of get those points across, or to have those more open conversations if we ask the right questions. So probably the key learnings there for me are empower ourselves with knowledge. I've been interested in so many different topics over the years that I can contribute to any conversation at any level, whether it's a CEO, whether it's a board, whether it's a chairperson, whether it's, a worker in a factory, or whether it's a worker in a field in the vineyards out here. I feel like I can have a conversation at any level. And I have so many different interests, and I've empowered myself with so many different aspects of knowledge, that those conversations, you've just got to find out what's of interest to that person. And you do that through lots of questions, asking lots of questions and gathering information.
Yeah, I think that's definitely, for me anyway, would be, other than being polite and nodding and smiling through it, and I'm either one or the other, and I'm just trying to find a happy medium myself, where I can still, invite that conversation going in. This is really all interesting, and I think that, the whole purpose-driven thing, going back to that, I think I was first introduced to that whole theory probably in the early 2000s with Oprah. And at one point, she actually sent out journals. She spent a lot of money. And if you wanted a purpose-driven journal for free, you would, at one point, I don't know if it was signing into a website or how the mechanism started, but I got that purpose-driven journal, and I thought it was so perfect. It was from Oprah, and I never wrote in it. I never wrote in it. I was like, this is so perfect. I'm going to mess it up with my purpose, which was ridiculous, right? But then you think about it now I would tear it to shreds. I would totally use it. But it's funny that, where you start and where you go from this. So I think it's a really interesting thing to, even if we're familiar with the process, maybe reframing it now for just in time for 2020, and figuring out what it is that purpose-driven is for us. So I guess if you could lead us on maybe 3 key things that we can start that internal dialogue and really revealing or rejudging up the purpose that we need to do, how would you start?
The fundamental part to starting is actually knowing who you are, and knowing the truth of who you are, not who our parents want us to be, or our friends think we are, or our sisters think we are, or anyone else. It's really spending that time in your own space and doing the work to connect to who you are. There's a really wonderful, speaking of Oprah before, a really wonderful 21-day meditation, and it's called Connecting to Who You Are. And it's a Deepak and Oprah one, which you can download from the Deepak and Oprah meditation experience. And it takes you on this 21-day journey. So you do 20 minutes of meditation, and then they've got a series of journal and questions that it asks you. And through that process and connecting to the truth of who you are, finding out what your true passions are, finding out what your true skills are, finding out what your true interests are, not for what everyone else thinks that you're interested in. What is the truth of what you're interested in? Then you actually start that process, connecting to who you are, connecting to the things that you love, connecting to the things that you're good at. And that's where you start to find that purpose piece. Because then if you can align all of those things to you getting up each and every day and doing something that's meaningful and doing something that is something that you love, how much happier are we going to be as humans? And if we have a world of happy humans, imagine what that would look like every single day. I always say, imagine going into the office and every single person was in a great mood, happy, energetic, imagine the productivity of happy humans. Bhutan doesn't measure gross GDP. They measure gross national happiness because they want their people to be happy. And it's still a long journey. And I think New Zealand as a country and as a culture want happy humans in their organizations, in their culture. And I think there's a long way to go here. But I think if we start to embed some of those things around the true meaning of happiness and what makes us happy and what makes us feel good every single day, and starting on that journey. And it's such a wonderful time of year when we are about to have a bit of a break from the world and we can disconnect and we can reinvigorate our spirit, going on that journey to connect to who you are and then seeing where that fits into your world for the future. And that might mean making some really bold decisions. It might mean leaving toxic relationships. It might mean leaving jobs that you hate. It might mean taking risks and jumping on a plane and moving to another country. I don't know. You never know where that might land. But I think if we sit and don't make bold moves and we just stay in a state of comfort, that's very boring.
Right. Absolutely. Let me ask you this, Catherine. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? My greatest...
Go ahead.
You go.
No, I was going to say, aside from your website, and tell us what your website is.
Yeah. So you can find me at entrepreneurialwomenwithpurpose.com. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn, and I think I love connecting with people on LinkedIn because it puts a face to the name. It adds some context and adds some content so you know their background, and that's a really great way to start those conversations, because if you've got similar interests, for example, or you've got similar, groups that you're connected with, I think that's a really great place to connect with people. So I love connecting with people through there. Facebook, I'm not much of an Instagram lover. I think it's a little bit of a fake world for me for some reason. So I more connect on the business side, and I connect on Facebook. So yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you, Catherine, so much. I really appreciate this, and I'd love to invite you back to continue and ask you a lot of different questions and find out what's happening in your world. What is it that you're going to be launching? Actually, let's see if we can do something like that next week.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks for listening, but before you go, I want to include an exclusive free offer for my listeners. I know as an online business owner and owner of a marketing agency that planning your social media like Instagram or LinkedIn can be exhausting, or you don't have the time or energy to get this done. Let me take this off your plate. Our wish for you is to make life just a little bit easier. Sign up for our free instant social media monthly content calendar at socialglobalgrind.com. Or you can just go to the show notes and click on the link. Thanks for listening.